everyone. So, in the interest of full disclosure, I am a little under the weather. So, I am going to be sitting, and I am going to be reading without slides, but as you can see, I have a little bit of a personality, so it is not going to be a dull reading thing, but I'm also going to harken back to my librarian roots, and we're going to pretend it's lunchtime story time, okay? So I'm going to tell some stories. So hi, I'm Tracy Maleeff. I'm InfoSec Sherpa. I was Library Sherpa, and then I developed a hankering for security is the short story of it. So I quit my job at the law firm a year ago this month and started my own company so that I could move closer to InfoSec. So I went to something crazy like 12 InfoSec conferences in 2016 and wrote every blog I could possibly write and did interviews and podcasts and things like that because I tasted the blood of security and I wanted some more. So I'm here today to talk to you about something I've talked a lot about in library world, which is networking, and networking with people, not stacks, and not stacks of people, because that's the name of my band. So I feel like I'm obligated to give you some of my security street cred, in case you're like, okay, she doesn't know anything about our world. So this is one thing that I did in actually 2015. So while I was still a law firm librarian, through Women's Society of Cyber Jitsu, which was, woohoo, one of the groups that was up here just now, I had taken some of their classes, and security became my quirky hobby. So I was the weird lady who liked to talk to people about two-factor authentication, while I was doing legal research for them. I'm a hit at parties. So I went to the CIO of the law firm in September of 2015, and I said, hey, security is my quirky hobby. What's the firm doing for Cybersecurity Awareness Month in October? I'd like to be involved. So I received a very nice reply of what's Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So I first educated him about Cybersecurity Awareness Month, and I had this 5-point plan all ready to go. And I sent it to him, and the response was, I like all of this, we're doing all of it, and you're in charge. So I was the point person between marketing and the IT department, and we ran this 5-week long, because that year October had 5 Fridays. I did these infographics. I didn't do the cool graphics part because that's not my forte, but I supplied the quotes and the data and the statistics and the information and the vocabulary, and somebody made it look pretty, and we educated the firm. And that's what I did. And I had cool things like, fishing and spearfishing, don't be a great catch, stuff like that. So November 1st came around, and I was like, that was awesome. That was the best month of my life. What else can I do for the firm in security? And they were like, you can do it again next year. Well, that just wasn't enough. So that's kind of how I got here today, is I was like, yeah, I need to take things into my own hands. So that's when I started the process of, I think I need to find out something else. My own company came about. And yeah, so that's kind of how I'm here today. So I feel like, does that give me some street cred? Yes, no? Okay, thank you. All right. So I'm here to talk to you today about networking as a professional skill. Believe it or not, I've had many people argue with me about networking. They will angrily say to me, I don't need to network. It's not part of my job description. Or networking is so slimy and underhanded. Or I can't network. I'm an introvert. Does any of that sound familiar? Resonate with you? I see some nodding heads. So what I'd like to do with our time here today is to tell you through examples from my experiences how you can get on board the networking train, or if you're already on board, how you can refine it and take it to a new level. So my presentation is basically divided into 2 parts. 1, how networking with humans, I feel like I need to keep distinguishing that, with humans, is a skill that can be learned and honed. You know what also was a skill that you already learned and honed? Coding. Okay? It is a skill to be learned and honed. Second, I wish to share with you my ideas of how you can take those networking skills, combine them with an intrapreneurial spirit, I'll explain that later, to help create a culture of security. Ready? All right. Do we have any bike riders in here? Raise your hand, bike riders. All right, bike riders. you find it to be a fun and, casual activity, right? Not a big deal. Okay, so you see, October 2015 marks a momentous occasion in my life. What was the occasion? That I rode a bike on a bike path alongside the Pacific Ocean. Because you see, for me, expressions like, it's like riding a bike, doesn't exactly resonate with me as it does for other people. I'm terrified of bike riding, like legit terrified, like almost as much of clowns, my clown fear is pretty high. Bike riding is like just right below it. The thought of it gets me very anxious. I get nervous, and I get symptoms like increased heart rate, and believe that is even before the exercise part. That's before pedaling. I am a wreck. I get this overwhelming sense of dread and anxiety. Now, people tell me this is how they feel when they're faced with a networking situation, or how they feel about networking. So a few years ago, I had the realization that it was, honestly, it was beginning to get a little ridiculous for me to have this extreme adverse reaction to bike riding, and I set out to do something about it. So I mentally broke it down to essentially what it is. It is a skill to be learned and honed. And I set out to slay this two-wheeled dragon by working up the courage to rent a bike whenever I could. Now, sometimes I had my husband with me, or I had friends for support, and sometimes I went at it alone. I put in a genuine effort each time, even if it was for only a short spurt. Now, in California, I worked up the courage to rent a beautiful bubblegum pink beach cruiser. I nervously paced outside the bike shop. I looked like I was casing the joint. I was so nervous. I was walking back and forth. So when I finally decided to take the plunge and went inside, I asked the woman in the bike shop for the most solid, most durable, fattest tired bike that was best for beginners. So she found me this beautiful bubblegum beach cruiser. So she's, signing out all the stuff to me. So I nervously started chattering on. Something traumatic may happen to me. I might get emotional. I may only have this bike out for 5 or 10 minutes, and I might bring it back, and I'm cool as a cucumber. She looks at me. I'm not here to judge you. You take however long or short as you want. But if you do only take 5 or 10 minutes, please know I still have to charge you the full hour. Fair enough. Okay. So I started to pedal away, and honestly, I look like a newborn giraffe trying to stand. I heard her call out to me, "I believe in you." True story, she did do that. Bolstered by this random bike shop woman's kindness and confidence in me, I pedaled out to Port Pinos, 5 miles away. Thank you. Sure, I was terrified while doing it, but I completed that 10-mile round-trip journey because I still had to take the bike back. And quick side note, I looked up an Uber to see if one of them could take that bike. I totally was on my phone going, is there anybody can pick me up? Because I think 5 miles is an accomplishment, right? But fortunately, the bike gods were were with me that day, and they were like, no, you better get your butt back on that bike and go return it before you own that bike. But I was in one piece. I returned that bike. I walked in triumphantly, stride of pride, back into the bike shop. And I realized, I could continue to work on mastering this skill. This is a skill that's difficult for me, but I know that it's one that comes easier to others, and that's okay. So breaking bike riding down that way helps me to take the fear out of it. Networking with people or bike riding does not have to be scary. It can just be a skill to be learned or honed. So there's this guy named Glenn Llopis, Llopis, entrepreneur. He has like 8 different slashes after his name of what he is. But whatever it is that he actually does, other than just make great quotes, I'm not sure. But he always had these great quotes about networking. So I have a couple quotes from him that I'm going to say today. So one is, networking is not easy. for some, it's like having to take a required class in college that you have no interest in, but you need to do it in order to graduate. So remember, in business and in life, success is learned from how to do things you don't like doing. So don't give me the excuse that you don't like to network. If you want to be successful in your career, you need to do some things you don't like. So I think of professional networking like a seesaw, giving and taking in balance. Good networkers will think about what he or she can do for the other person before asking for something for themselves. But I also like to use the phrase that I did come up with, cultivate your network like a garden. You know, you need to maintain your professional network. Not too much and overwork them, and not too little that they wither away. Kind of like, rotating crops and leaving one fallow so that it can regain nutrients again. It's best to stagger the timing of your correspondence and to stagger the timing of favors to ask so that you don't burn through your network. The point of me telling you this is that if you feel like networking is slimy and underhanded, then either you or the person you're networking with, they're doing it wrong. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. So it should be a cultivated give and take. So what if you are in a situation where someone is doing it wrong? Step away. Unless for some reason they have the return on investment for you networking with them is super high, then take charge, kind of lead the conversation away from, the slimy area. But if you don't have any reason to keep networking them, walk away. I think in dating and in networking, there's a rule of thirds. A third of the people you meet are going to be able to help you in some way. So in dating, it would be they would like you. Another third of the people, you can help them. So that would be that you like them. And there's going to be a third of people that you just want to run away in dating and networking. And that's fine. So, even if it's someone that that can help you, you still need to figure out a way to help them. And if you're newer in your career or in the industry, and you're probably sitting there thinking like, okay, thanks lady, what do I have to offer a CISO? Well, sometimes CISOs put questions out on social media because they don't have all the answers. Maybe you could help and maybe help research something, or be like, oh wait, I met somebody else who I think can help answer your question. Let me introduce you to them. You just help that person and you have no knowledge in this industry. Okay, so again, always think about what you can be doing to help someone else. I do it all the time. I love to help people, and maybe it's the librarian in me. I love connecting people with information. And sometimes that information is a person, because that person has information. So think of it that way. Have that perspective. And, it's a give and take. So now I want to touch upon a pet peeve of mine as it relates to networking. So let's do a little quick show of hands here. How many of you self-identify as an introvert? Okay, I expected that. Raise your hands, extrovert. Woo-woo! Yeah, we're the loudest too. What? How about ambivert? Anybody know what an ambivert? There we go. Thank you, sir. Okay, so my pet peeve is that I hate those words. I'll explain why. I'm not a monster. I'll explain why. Okay, so my pet peeve isn't necessarily that people use them to self-identify. They are real terms. They have real meanings, as theorized by Carl Jung. I don't know if you knew that was Carl Jung. Now, except for ambivert, which was coined by Kimball Young in 1927. So I don't know. I don't like to figure that one. That's too new. I don't know. Okay, so what my pet peeve is? My pet peeve is that people use these words for excuses to not network or to network poorly. Remember earlier in my talk I said, I can't network, I'm an introvert. Okay, no, that's not an excuse. That's a personality type that Carl Jung decided that you fit into. That's what that is. So many times I've heard people say that they, can't do a networking activity because they're an introvert. Or I've seen instances where people are rude while they're networking and they chalk it up to being an extrovert. True story. I've heard so many people just be ridiculously rude and brash and arrogant. And it's like, I'm an extrovert. Like, you don't know what that word means. You're using it wrong. The famous Myers-Briggs type indicator, the MBTI, that was based on Carl Jung's work. I think they basically ripped it off, but I don't know. You can read up on that later. Where's my psychology girl? Where's Ariel? They ripped it off, right? Yeah, they totally ripped it off. Okay. So if you've ever taken the test, you know that there's ranges. There's ranges. Okay. So nobody is just one thing. There's ranges. So quick side note, there's actually a Star Wars version of the MBTI results, how those 16 different personality types relate to Star Wars. Darth Vader right here. Yes. I am proud of it. My husband's like, is that really, are you really happy about that? I'm like, yeah. I can live with that. I can live with that. So anyway, yeah, it's actually a fun thing to go look up. So see if you're Luke, Leia, Han, Chewie, whatever, but Darth Vader. I also know of a very clever social engineer who was hired to specifically game that system. She was given an assignment that she had to take the test 16 times, and each time it was basically kind of like calling shots in pool. They were like, all right, take that one and make it an INTJ. Bam, 16 times in a row. Bam, bam, bam. The system can be gamed, okay? So maybe the day that you took it, you were feeling particularly emo. Maybe you listened to, the Marcy and Smiths on the way over to the testing site, and you're just like, oh, life is futile. Why am I taking this test? And that's going to affect your score results, okay? So this is why it's a pet peeve. I just don't use it as an excuse. It's fine that you raised your hands. I have no ill towards you if you raised your hand because you said you're introvert. But just do me a favor, don't use it as an excuse why you can't network and talk to someone. Know your limitations. If you know that you can handle 30 minutes in an event, be like, oh, I'm going to schedule a phone call to my phone from an app that I'm sure exists. If not, patent pending, I'm going to invent it. And call yourself and be like, oh, I'm sorry, I have to take this. Know who you are. Know your limits. Know your situation and react accordingly. Don't hide behind a psychology term, because that's all it is. It's a term. And I think if you combined, and I'm building on this here, combine that networking is a skill, and not hiding behind psychology terms that Carl Jung came up with a long time ago, you can do this. You can network. All right, so my boy Glenn had some other things to say. You don't need to be naturally outspoken to be successful in networking environments. However, you do need to be prepared to deliver value when called upon. So in other words, when it's your turn to say something, make it count. Or as RuPaul would say, make it work. Or no, that's what's his face, Tim Gunn. RuPaul's just work. Anyway, sorry. This is what I get for ad-libbing. Stick to the script, Tracy. So when I was first drawn into the InfoSec world, a seasoned professional told me that there are 3 things that I had to accept in order to succeed in information security. 1, you may have to continually justify the importance of your job and or department to your organization. 2, you may have to work with flat budgets or no budgets at all. And 3, you will have to drop everything and rush to help the very people who question the importance of your job and your department and give you no money. So I thought about it. I was silent for a second, and then I started laughing. And he goes, why are you laughing? I said, dude, you literally just described the day in the life of a librarian. And he goes, oh, you'll do just fine. And when I heard that, I was like, oh, I got this thing. I got this. It's true. That's a lot of people face this. So networking within your organization is a way to communicate your value as a professional. I'd like to give you some different examples of networking experiences that I've done and how to put yourself out there and how networking communicates value. Okay, so the first example, I used to take the train into work, and I would commute in, and on the platform would be this partner at the firm. And I would talk to her on the train platform. And I know one of my friends in the audience is a lawyer. I'm not making any disparaging comments about attorneys, but attorneys do usually like to talk about themselves. Usually. So all you have to say is, hey, how's your practice going? What sort of things are you working on in your practice? So she would tell me the things that she was working on. And, we would do this all the time, but then we would get on the train and then sit in different places and not talk to each other, and that was totally fine. Again, I knew my limitations. First thing in the morning, I could handle a few minutes waiting for the train, and then I wanted to sit down and get to my knitting and listen to podcasts and things like that. Okay, so my job at the library was to handle a lot of the acquisitions and development and things like that. So one day I see this book that I'm thinking to myself, and again, networking, thinking of others. Oh, I think this would be great for her practice. And it was of a dollar amount that I had authority to purchase. So I bought the book and gave it to her with a little note saying, based on our conversations, I think this will be good for your practice. So 6 months later, she emails my boss, the library director, copies me on it, and says, that book has not left my desk in 6 months. I've won 3 cases for the firm as a direct result of that book. And it was all because she stopped to ask me about my practice and the things that I do. Thank you. And I never expected to hear from her again, and I was fine with that. But to have that validation, that just chatting up someone and, remembering it and doing something about it. So into her mind, that's proving my value, proving the department's value, proving value, all from networking. So now I'm going to give you an example of how external networking helped me internally. So I used to be really involved, and I still am a member of the Special Libraries Association. And I would go to their conferences, and I would meet librarians from all over the world. And I particularly came close, because I'm a big Anglophile nerd, to a lot of the UK-based librarians. So one day, one of the senior partners called a meeting with me and the director, and the firm was opening an office somewhere in the Middle East. Country redacted. He said something very specific that I thought was odd. He rattled off 3 big, well-known law firms that were UK-based and said, they've been there for years. I want the library that they have. Now, on the face value, that sounds like an impossible task, right? You're like, well, dude, how do I know? I mean, again, these are law firm libraries. They're not like, it's not like the, Library of Congress where you can just walk in, they're law firm libraries. So I just start to smile, and my boss is looking at me like, what are we going to do? And I'm like, I got this. Because of networking, I knew librarians at those 3 firms. Got back to my office, sent an email to all 3 at the same time so that I wasn't wasting their time, because I knew one of them would claim it and let the others know. So the one replied right away and said, my boss opened that office in that country that you're talking about. Let me go talk to her. She talked to her, so the next day, I have this PDF, trust but verify, I did open it, it was fine. And she said to me, when I told her it was for you, she said, just print out the collection from the catalog and just give it to her. So they handed me a PDF of in library terms, we would call it their core collection, which is, the books and the resources in that collection for that office that the day before we were like, how in the world are we going to get this information? So I did stride of pride down the hall to my boss's office, put it on her desk, and I'm like, networking, here you go. So not only did that cement my ability, because then the partner was thrilled. The partner was like, damn, not only did you turn this around quickly, but you got everything. Also, he thought that we stole it, which was kind of funny. I was like, no, this was totes legit. Dude, I'm good. I'm not that good, but come on. So anyway, I just thought that was funny, because he was like, what did you do, steal this? I'm like, no, sir. But not only did that cement the library's value, but it also helped cement my business case of having the firm pay for me to go to those conferences, right? Again, this is how you start to prove things. You prove value. So now you're like, okay, that's library world. Mazel tov to you for doing good stuff. How does this work into creating a culture of security? Okay, so this is where that intrapreneurial spirit comes in. I don't know who coined the word intrapreneur, but I love it and use it all the time. So it's like the word entrepreneur, but in case you didn't pick up on that. So it's about having the drive and ingenuity of an entrepreneur, but within the confines of your organization. So it's doing things like branding and name recognition, either of yourself or of your department, so that your users, who, I don't know if this has ever been brought up before in InfoSec, but your users are your customers, right? Like, you need to have customer service and treat them accordingly. So you need to have that your internal customers know who you are and what you do, so that you build this sense of value and trust. And I believe my girl Ariel talked about that a little bit early in her talk. So this is all dovetailing nicely with that. Because you need to make allies, not enemies, of the people that you're trying to help. So I'm going to share some stories of internal networking related to things that I've done. Now, granted, they're not necessarily security related, but I trust you all are intelligent enough to figure out how to apply this to security situations. So I have 6 points. I'll start with number 1. I got involved. When I saw that my firm was asking for volunteers for the Diversity and Inclusion Committee, I jumped at the chance to get involved. Not only is that topic important to me, but I knew it was a great way to network internally and to get to know my internal customers and just kind of better represent myself and my department. So funny story. It's funny now. One of the first meetings, we're at this law firm. Law firms have these big, intimidating, long, shiny tables. Everybody at the long table was an attorney but me. And I was well aware of this fact, but I did not make a big deal of it. And then I hear a booming voice from the other end of the very long table. It was a senior partner who looked down the table at me and said, "Oh, look at you down there, the only non-attorney at the table." And it just felt so belittling, and I'm from Philly, so believe me, in my mind, you know the response. Like, I was ready to throw a snowball with a battery inside. I was like, oh hell no. But I kept my cool, and just smiled and said, "Well, from where I'm sitting, you're all the non-librarians at the table." And he threw so again, there was that awkward pause that feels like forever. He threw his head back and laughed and said, "Touché." And there was a partner sitting next to me who turned and whispered to me, "Good for you." And I'm like, I'm here legit to work on this committee and to represent myself. And you know that nobody messed with me after that, because it was important to me to show that the librarians weren't shrinking violets. I can hang and talk at this table and tell you what I wanted to do. So that was a big deal for me. But the world didn't end. I didn't get fired. I wasn't rude. Like I said, I smiled. I turned it into a joke. Worst case scenario, it would have fallen flat, and then they all just would have been like, "Okay, next order of business." So don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. If somebody wants to put some sort of label on you that, "Oh, you're from the IT department and blah, blah, blah," make a joke, diffuse a situation. Show them that you're a force to be reckoned with in a respectful sort of way. So let's talk about branding, and not the kind that hurts unless you're into that, and that's a different talk. But what I used to do all the time, and granted, it can be uncomfortable, but I would just go around the firm and be like, "Hi, I'm Tracy from the library. I'm Tracy from the library." What does that do? It tells people my name, tells people where I'm from. I'm Tracy from the library. Elevator pitches. Show of hands. You know what an elevator pitch is? Okay? Keep your hands up if you have one already. All right, excellent. Kudos. If I had candy, I'd throw it right now. I meant to get Smarties candy because I wanted to show that everybody was Smarties, but all I could find were Dum-Dums, and I felt that sent the wrong message. So I was like, so just pretend I'm throwing Smarties at you. Elevator pitches are great things. Like, if people are holding books or holding newspapers or something in the elevator, be like, "Hey, is that what you're working on in your practice?" Or, is that what you do? Or blah, blah, blah. Talk about, yeah, I know it can be kind of intimidating, but, take a breath. Just ask the question, and believe me, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be more freaked out than you are. And they might just give you an answer to shut you up, but you know what? I got my answer. I know something about them. There have been times when I've given an elevator pitch, and I've gone back to my office and I emailed that person followed up, sometimes something with something I found. Hey, we spoke briefly in the elevator. Here's an article about that topic that we talked about, or here's a book that the library has about that. So in a security situation, and actually I do have one I can share. I'm going to mush number 6 into number 2 right now because it applies. I noticed that one of the super high-level C-suite people at one of the jobs I was at got a brand new Apple Watch back when they first came out. And I distinctly remember him being like, ooh, everybody look at my... He literally was like, everybody look at my Apple Watch. But I remember that he had an Apple Watch. And maybe about a month later, there was some sort of critical update that was required. I emailed it to him. I said, oh, I saw in the elevator that you had an Apple Watch, and this security warning came out, and I thought you should know. He went to my boss to tell me how awesome he thought that I knew that he had the Apple Watch, that I remembered, and that I saw that security reminder and sent it to him. So my boss was just like, good job. So again, like these sorts of things, and they're not creepy, they're helpful because they appreciate it. Now, obviously, if someone's like talking about a personal situation, don't be like that weird person and do stuff. But, use your best judgment. If you have difficulty discerning that, have a wingman or a wingwoman and be like, is that an appropriate time to step in? And they'll be like, no. So another thing, 3, walkabouts. That was supposed to be an Australian accent. In addition to telling people that I'm Tracy from the library, I used to actually get up out of my chair, except for today, and out of my office and go visit the users, especially if I was in the outer offices, because when I worked for law firms, I would be in headquarters office and everybody would be out other parts of the country and the world. So I would walk the halls and stop into offices and ask questions. And sure, there were times I didn't feel like doing this. I would just want to sit at my desk at the other office and just do my stuff. So what I used to do when I would come in the morning, I used to go to DC a lot. So I would come in the morning, send an email out as a warning. A flare was fired. I am in your office. I am coming around today if you have anything. So they were also warned. So I gave them fair warning. If they didn't want to talk to me, they could keep their door shut. But so anybody who had their door open was fair game. So I would go into these offices. Now there's a scene from 30 Rock, which is one of my favorite shows, where Jack Donaghy was accused of only looking at people and things and their dollar value. And he looked at a room and everything on it had a dollar value on it and everything. That's how I would walk into an attorney's office, because I knew how much those books cost. And if I saw one still sitting in shrink wrap, I knew they didn't need it. So I would walk in, I would talk to them about their beach house or their vacation or their kids or whatever. And the whole time I was scanning. What are they not using? What costs $500 that I need to remind them costs $500 and they should be using? Or what are they using that's out of date? Many times I would find books and because I knew, so for you it would be knowing your network, I knew my collection. I knew my collection by looking at it. There was an attorney who had on his credenza behind him a book, and I even just kind of went like this, and I said, oh, you're not using that, are you? And he goes, yeah, I'm using it right now for a case. I said, that's 2 editions old. I'm like, stop what you're doing. Let me get you a new one. I knew my customers and my collection that well that I could walk into an office and know that. So again, it's a little bit more different with networks, but know what's on your network. Know things. Get to know your users. If you walk into a user's office and you see a bunch of devices, like, hey, are you connected to our Wi-Fi? Is your device updated? Things like that. In my mind, that would be the equivalent of the book situation. So let's move ahead here. So then my buddy Glenn said that networking is a responsibility and it requires active behavior. You need to be engaged with what others are doing. I went to graduate school for the dark arts of library science, and I have this master's degree in library science, and one of the things that we talked about is the reference interview. So the reference interview would be like troubleshooting. So not only is it asking questions of what the user wants, but it's listening for what they're not saying, and then you ask them about that. So active listening, believe it was, again, sorry, Ariel, you said 2 ears, 1 mouth. Listen more than you talk. Listen to what these people are saying. Again, half the time they don't know what they're asking for. I used to have these 2 books that were very similar in title, but were very different in legal content and price. 9 times out of 10, attorneys would say to me, I need this book. And I knew they meant the other one. So much so that I had a canned email all ready to go saying, I know you asked me for this, but I know you really need this. And I'd have pictures of both books in the email. 9 times out of 10 was, oh, you're right. It's really and I'm like, yeah, I know. So again, you need to, listening to what people aren't saying is, and I know that sounds weird. I know that sounds like some sort of, again, like weird black magic stuff, but it's just, you have to start practicing it and learn it. Figure out where are the gaps. What information don't you have? What are they not saying? Because that's usually where the problem lies, because they don't know how to explain it. They don't know the words for it. They don't know how to do it. So communication is key. So in one of my past jobs, I wrote an internal newsletter called 5 for Friday. And it contained the 5 most important items that had happened that week in that industry. I would receive feedback all the time from people who'd be like, I didn't know that, and I learned that from your email. So again, people want to know stuff. And again, this gives you the opportunity to place yourself in an area of value and trust, and that they'll come to you and ask you questions. Now, I know some people are probably like rolling their eyes at that, like, oh no, hell no. I don't want everybody asking me questions all the time. So what would happen to me is there were times when legitimately people would follow up with me about stuff that wasn't my job. Did I say that? No. But what I would do is I would pick up the phone, call the reference desk, and get one of my coworkers on the phone, and I would say, hi, I have so-and-so, and they have a reference question. And I would tell the person on the other line, I can't help you with that, but let me connect you with someone who can. Rather than just blind transfer, I would get the information ahead of time, and then I would say to my coworker, so-and-so's calling, and they need to, they need to look up some statutes in Minnesota or something like that, and that is what they want. Get as much information ahead of time so that your customer isn't relaying the story all over again because they think that I can help. And then so I'm just taking copious notes, and then cheerfully handing it off and going there. So there is a way to do that. There is a way, the downside is that everyone's going to come to you and ask you questions. Well, legitimately figure out what is and what isn't your job. And if it's not your job, just hand it over on a silver platter. There's a lot of stores that they just don't point to things. They're like, let me walk and show you there and do that. And I know sometimes you're just like, okay, this is really awkward. I wish you would just point and show me, but it's really part of the experience. Okay. And you go do that and you just hand it over. And I found that just works magic. And then, it takes 2 seconds out of my day to hand it over. And then I'm like, all those notes, I can just delete that mental file because I don't care anymore. It's not my problem. So, all this rolls in together as, creating trust, creating allies, so that when you need your users to do something differently, like change their habits, like not clicking on suspicious emails and things like that, they're going to listen to you. They're going to trust you as a resource. They're going to value what you have to say. Because there was a lot of that in library world too. We'd have to change databases all the time. Copyright, we'd have to, one of my jokes more recently is, copyright and being a librarian is very much like InfoSec, because if you don't do copyright or security correctly, you're going to get into trouble. And I used to have to talk to attorneys all the time about copyright. Like, please don't burn that CD-ROM from the libraries of the university library that we don't own that book. And I used to have all kinds of conversations like we don't own that CD. You can't burn that. You can't do that. So that was the struggle that I had to deal with, was staying after people for copyright. And much like you with security, I couldn't always see what they were doing. And I would have to deal, since I was the point person, I'd have to deal with the angry phone calls from vendors going, so-and-so shared all this content with, I found people would email stuff around that was supposed to be proprietary database content, and somehow the email trail would always wind up back at the vendor. And I'd get the phone call, and I can't stay on top of them 24/7. So it's like, okay, we'll have another copyright training again. But because I would develop these good relationships with these people, I could go to them and sit in their office and just be like, dude, how many times do we have to keep going through this? Because I earned the right to go up there and be like, okay, we need to have a little talk. And I have a couple more minutes here. I just want to close with one last story. So, great example of this is how I earned my stripes to be able to be an authority of this. We had an associate join one of the firms I was working at, just demanded a ridiculous amount of resources, just thousands of dollars of books from disciplines outside his practice area. I'm like, you're a securities attorney. Why do you need family law books? Like, what are you doing? And it's like, oh, well, one day I might want to do that. I'm like, okay, well, one day I'll buy that for you, but I'm not buying it for you now. You don't need it to do your job, because it was very crucial. I always did my best to know what my users' jobs were. If I didn't know, I would ask, tell me about your job, because if they're fighting you on something, there's probably a really good reason why they want it or they need it. And thank you. So ask them what their jobs are. And that's what I went back before about asking the attorney, tell me about your practice. That's another way of, what do you do all day? And then was, what do you ask? So paralegals, secretaries, admin assistants, whatever, what have you, I would ask them, tell me about your job. What is it? How do you use this resource? So because I knew what this associate's job was, I knew that he didn't need those books. I knew it. So he thought he was being sly, and he went to a very, very senior partner and started to complain about that mean librarian, Tracy from the library, blah, blah, blah. So I get this phone call, and I am on speakerphone, and it is the very senior partner he's like, oh, and I have so-and-so in my office here. And he asked for my side of the story, and I told him, and then this is one of my favorite moments of my life. The senior partner literally said, if Tracy says you don't need it, you don't need it. And he's like, I'm sorry to bother you. We're done now. You have a great day. And then hung up the phone, and I'm like, suck it. And that's like the pinnacle, right? Who was I? I was the librarian at the firm. It would have been very easy to bulldoze me, right? Very easy for that senior partner to be like, just get him, whatever. No, I had worked hard through internal networking to create a sense of value, create trust. This is the way we do things. An associate doesn't get, carte blanche to order whatever he or she wants. I wasn't denying him anything that he needed to do his job. I was denying him extras that he didn't need, saving the firm money. So that was such a great feeling. I was like, yes, I've made it. And it's little moments like that you will know that what you're doing is working. And savor those moments and talk about them ad nauseum like I do with that one. Because it makes me feel good again. I'm remembering now how good I felt that, I had a say in this situation. I was a valued and respected employee, and my job, I did my job. I saved the firm money and gave the person what they need. So that's how you know it's working. All right, so some closing thoughts here, because we are getting close to time. So to paraphrase Big Daddy Kane, networking ain't easy. If you don't know what the original is, look it up. I see some laughs here. To paraphrase the Godfather of Soul, get up off of that thing and network till you feel better. Networking with humans is a skill that can be learned and honed. You can then take those skills with your entrepreneurial spirit and cultivate a culture of whatever it is you want to accomplish. Before you know it, it will come as easy to you as riding a bike. Thank you. We have time for questions, or if I was really mean, I'd force you to network with each other, but I don't know. You guys were a really good audience, so I don't think I'll force anybody. But I would say a question. Yes, hi.
Hi. Thanks very much. I appreciate the presentation. Do you have insight about LinkedIn and what is useful about LinkedIn?
That's another talk I give that I'm available for if someone wants to hire me. LinkedIn is a necessary evil. It's not necessarily good for internal networking, which is what I was concentrating on today. When I give other talks about networking, I get more into using Twitter and social media and LinkedIn for stuff like that. So I just want to keep the comments related to today's theme, which, a lot of companies have some sort of internal version of that. But as far as like external stuff, it's a necessary evil that you need to do. It's a pretty terrible resource. Like, it's just not, intuitive. They actually recently redid it. Have you logged in lately? It looks pretty terrible. But people use it and people rely on it, and you just need to do it. It doesn't really help you internally, and that's kind of what this talk was about. So, any other questions? Does anybody have any stories that they want to share or something?
How do you get around? I find I go to the network events at my company,
Mm-hmm.
but everyone's very clicky. So once they start talking, they're in a little clique, and it's really hard for you to get in there and introduce yourself without sort of interrupting and breaking apart a conversation. Is there an easy way to do that?
So great. Yeah, great question. The question was, a lot of companies will have cocktail hours or some sort of event, like a holiday party or something like that. And, he raised a very good question of, they tend to get very cliquey. So how do you get in and you do stuff? So, to kind of borrow from my external networking spiel that I usually give is, there's two ways you can go about doing that. There's from Animal House. There's the guy who just walks up and he's like, "Rush Chairman, damn glad to meet you." You just kind of get in there and, you kind of just listen for a break in the conversation and just kind of be like, "Hey, I just wanted to say hi." If it's it's like happy holidays or whatever. Like, I'm, blah, blah from IT or whatever, and just wanted to say hi and blah, blah, blah. You can go in and do that. That's kind of a bold way to do that. Have a wingman or a wingwoman, and then you kind of do the How I Met Your Mother. Have you met Ted? You have someone introduce you for you. It's helpful if you go to other events around the year so that then you can kind of go up to people That's the path of least resistance is to start to go up to people that you already know. And maybe even talk about them. Maybe you help them with a problem a month before, and maybe, especially if you do a lot of work and they don't know your face, you can be like, "Hi, I'm Dennis." I don't know if your name's Dennis, but "Hi, I'm Dennis, and I helped you with that problem last month. It's nice to meet you in person." And something like that. Little things like that. There's so many research requests or things. Now see, I was in the position at the firm where people knew who I was because I was the gatekeeper to buy stuff. So people knew who I was. So, but little things like that, just kind of go for the low hanging fruit, to use an overused expression. Does that help at all? Especially if you've done work with them in the past, but if you're at a holiday party, just start with the people that you know, and then maybe say to someone like, "Hey, do you know anybody in the tax department? I'd like to just meet somebody from tax." You can go and do that. I would just go do my "Hi, I'm Tracy from the library" spiel around the holiday party. I didn't care. I just went around and just started introducing myself and I didn't really get into this too much, but just, it is hard. Sometimes I struggle with it myself. Sometimes you need to channel the energy of someone else or a fictional character to help you through it. For the longest time, mine was Oprah. I would walk in my head, I was Oprah, walking into a room, go, "You get a business card, you get a business card, everybody gets a business card." I've refined that a little bit. Depending on the situation, I draw energy from someone, and that's what gets me through it. So, it could be a real person in InfoSec who has a dynamic personality, like a Jason Street, or it's, maybe a fictional character. Or I don't play those games, but if you have an elf you created that's really good in networking situations or something, maybe channel that. Or, just like I said, a personality, someone, like an Oprah or somebody. I'm not saying that you should be them, but just channel that energy of all right, I can do 15 minutes. What would Oprah do in this situation? Oprah would walk around the room and introduce herself to people. Does that make any sense? If you can't find it within yourself to do it, because believe me, some days the tank's low for me. And it depends my situation. I was actually talking to someone recently. For her situation, she needed to be very stoic and diplomatic, but stand up for herself. I told her to channel Julia Sugarbaker from Designing Women. Dixie Carter was the actress. I'm sure I'm like dating myself now. Like, shut up, old lady. But she was a very strong female Southern character who was very polite and very strong, but she got her point across. And this person knew the characters. I said, go watch a bunch of Designing Women. And, you know, when you're faced in that situation, just channel the energy of Julia Sugarbaker. So figure out who that is for you. And that's how you kind of go there, and that's how you go through it. So start with the people that you know and that you recognize, and, you know, just kind of put it out there. It helps if you have some sort of connection, if you've done work for them before. And also just ask people to introduce you to others. You know, that helps. It's the other thing I was just going to leave you with is what the library used to do is around holiday time, we would bake cookies for the other departments within the firm, and then we would go en masse, this like weird cookie parade, and we would go deliver them to the other department. And then we would stay for a few minutes and just socialize and meet people, so that, like, you know, when other times of the year when like we really needed a favor or something like that, it wasn't like we were going up to a stranger going like, I need you to do this for me. It's like they'd be like, hey, cookie lady, yeah, what do you need? Yeah. And, you know, I've had some people argue with me that that was like reinforcing female stereotypes in the workplace, but we had men in the library and they made cookies too. But it's some sort of just, it doesn't have to be cookies, just some sort of goodwill that you can go around other times of the year and see people in other departments, so that when you are faced with a networking situation, you're going to have some familiar faces to go up to. So I hope that helps. So awesome. So cool. If, I mean, you've seen me around, I'm on Twitter, I'm InfoSec Sherpa, and, I'm just, you guys were a great audience. Thank you so much. And that's me not feeling well. Can you imagine how I present when I am feeling well? Oh my God, I'm like schwitzing like I stole something here. I'm just a loud mouth in general now. But
It sounded like you were reading from.
oh yeah, this was all scripted, yeah. But thank you. No, again, much like networking with presenting.